You were never supposed to make it this far. Not because you lack the ability, because the system was not designed with you in mind. The mentors went to someone else. The connections materialized for someone else. The quiet confidence that comes from having people in your corner who believe in you before you've earned it, that went to someone else too. And you have been watching this from close enough range to feel it with a specificity that no amount of discipline or optimism has been able to fully neutralize. You know exactly what it costs to operate without a net. You have been paying that cost in silence for longer than most people would have lasted. But here is what nobody has told you, and what this discussion is going to force you to confront with clinical precision. The story you have been telling yourself about your situation, the one where the absence of support is the primary obstacle between you and where you want to be, that story is not wrong. It is incomplete. And the part that's missing is the part that changes everything. Because what the absence of support has been doing to you is not only what you think it's been doing. Underneath the disadvantage, underneath the slower timeline and the closed doors and the exhausting requirement to generate your own certainty from scratch, something else has been happening. Something that the supported path structurally cannot produce. And you have been so focused on what you don't have that you have almost entirely missed what the pressure has been building. Carl Jung understood this, not as theory, but as biography. In 1913, when he broke from Freud and the entire psychoanalytic establishment withdrew its institutional endorsement from his work, he didn't lose a colleague. He lost the primary external structure through which his professional identity had been organized, the framework that had given his ideas legitimacy, the community that had confirmed his direction, the most powerful validator in his intellectual world. All of it dissolved. What remained was Jung alone, in a silence so complete and so disorienting that he described the years that followed as a confrontation with forces in his own psyche he genuinely feared might destroy him. He didn't emerge from that period stronger in the motivational sense. He emerged as someone who had been forced to locate his own foundations in the only place they could be located when every external support has been stripped away. Inside. And what he built from that interior excavation became the most original and enduring contribution to the understanding of the human mind in the 20th century. The supported path did not produce that. The collapse of the supported path produced that. This is not a story about the romance of suffering. Jung had no patience for that, and neither do we. This is a story about what happens to the architecture of a self when the external scaffolding is absent long enough that the psyche is forced to build something real. Here is the first pattern interrupt that should reframe everything you've been told about your situation. Princeton psychologist Daniel Kahneman spent decades studying how humans make decisions under uncertainty. And one of his most consistent findings was that people systematically overvalue what they can see and undervalue what they cannot. The mentor's contribution is visible. The credential is visible. The network introduction that opened a door is visible. What is not visible is the internal infrastructure that never gets built when the external scaffolding is always present. What is not visible is the slow, unglamorous, completely unwitnessed process by which someone who has no external structure to rely on is forced to generate their own. The people watching you from the outside see disadvantage. They are not wrong. What they cannot see, because it has no external form, is the specific kind of development that disadvantage, when navigated consciously, is the only reliable mechanism for producing. The first case study is a man, call him Elliot, who spent his late 20s watching former classmates accelerate past him in a professional domain they had entered with inherited advantages he did not have, family connections that converted to introductions, mentors who appeared early in pointed directions, a particular quality of institutional confidence that comes from having had people in positions of authority confirm your potential before you had demonstrated it. Elliot had none of this. He had the same intelligence, comparable work ethic, and a significantly longer timeline to results. Watching the gap from close range produced something in him that he identified as motivation, but which, under clinical examination, was something more specific and more dangerous. It was defiance, the need to succeed, not because success was meaningful to him, but because success would constitute evidence. Evidence that the people who hadn't shown up were wrong not to. The problem with defiance as an engine is that it is entirely organized around the people who aren't there. Every decision Elliot made was unconsciously calibrated against an imagined audience of everyone who hadn't believed in him. His work ethic was real, his results were genuine, but his entire interior architecture was structured outward, toward the people he was trying to prove something to, which meant his sense of direction was not actually his. It was the photographic negative of someone else's doubt. He was not building toward anything he had chosen. He was building away from something he had never processed. And this is one of the two traps that destroy most people who walk the unsupported path. Not the obvious one of bitterness and withdrawal, but the subtler one of defiance that masquerades as drive, of a wound that presents itself as an engine, of motion that feels like purpose but is organized entirely around the wrong axis. The body language of someone operating from this position is distinctive if you know what to watch for. There is a specific quality of forward lean in professional contexts, a slightly over-prepared quality, a tendency toward responses that are slightly longer than the question required. The voice carries a low-frequency urgency that is not excitement, but something closer to the pressure of sustained proof. These are not the signals of someone building something they love. They are the signals of someone running from something they haven't named. The second case study is a woman, call her Nadia, who took the other fork. Same unsupported path, same absence of the institutional validation and relational backing that her peers seemed to move with as naturally as breathing. But Nadia's response to the silence was not defiance, it was withdrawal. Each time she reached and found nothing there, she recalibrated her reach slightly smaller. She told herself this was realism, maturity, the pragmatic adjustment of expectations to available resources. She built a philosophy around needing nothing from anyone, around the sufficiency of the self, around independence as not just a condition, but a value. Her presentation was contained, her emotional register narrow, her professional relationships functional and efficiently bounded. From the outside, she looked composed. Internally, she had performed a slow amputation of every part of herself that might reach towards something and find nothing. Jung described this configuration with precision. He called it the heroic refusal, the decision, made beneath the level of conscious awareness, to convert the wound of being unsupported into an ideology of not needing support. It feels like strength. It functions like armor, but armor and development are not the same thing. What Nadia had built was not an interior structure, it was a perimeter defense. And a perimeter defense is only as stable as the absence of the thing it's defending against. The moment genuine connection appeared in her life, the moment someone reached toward her with something real, the entire system experienced it not as an invitation, but as a threat. Because the ideology of not needing required the continued absence of things worth needing. She was not free. She was defended. And defended, as Jung understood, is not the same as developed.
The second pattern interrupt is a direct challenge that requires something from you. Right now, identify which of these two configurations is operating in you. Not in the abstract, not as a general tendency, but specifically, are you building primarily away from something, toward the proof of everyone who didn't show up? Or have you been slowly narrowing the perimeter of what you allow yourself to want, to reach for, to need, in direct proportion to how many times the reaching found nothing? You are almost certainly doing one of these things. Most people on the unsupported path are doing one of these things and doing it with enough skill that it passes as a personality trait rather than a coping mechanism. The ability to tell the difference between those two things, to see the mechanism operating in yourself with sufficient clarity to name it, is the beginning of the only exit that doesn't lead back to the same trap in a different form. The third case study is the one that maps the path through rather than around. A man, call him Marcus, started from a position that was structurally similar to Elliot and Nadia. No institutional backing, no mentor who appeared at the critical moment, no family structure that absorbed the cost of uncertainty or converted ambition into opportunity through pre-existing connections. He had the same silence they had, the same closed doors, and the same exhausting requirement to generate his own certainty without anyone confirming it was warranted. But Marcus made one decision that Elliot and Nadia did not make, not because he was more talented or more disciplined, but because at a specific and unremarkable moment, he stopped managing the silence and started asking what it contained. What it contained was not comfortable. There was the resentment he had been calling ambition, the grief of having wanted support and not received it that he had been converting into the fuel of defiance, the fear of being fundamentally alone in his own assessment of himself that he had been performing as independence. None of these things were weaknesses. They were the suppressed emotional contents of a person who had been required to function without the external structures that most people use to avoid exactly this encounter. But they had been operating as background processes, shaping every decision and consuming enormous psychological energy in the management of not looking at them directly. When Marcus began to look at them directly, not to be consumed by them, but to stop being controlled by them, the energy that had been allocated to that management became available for something else. The body language of someone who has done this work is recognizable not by what it presents, but by what it doesn't. There is an absence of the low-frequency urgency, a quality of stillness in the face of uncertainty that is not indifference, but stability. The voice carries conviction without the slightly elevated pressure of proof. These are the signals of someone whose interior architecture is resting on a foundation that was built from the inside rather than the borrowed from the outside. They are not performing confidence, they are operating from it. And the difference, while invisible in low-stakes environments, becomes decisively apparent when circumstances shift and the external structures around them change. Here is the third pattern interrupt, the one that reframes the entire comparison you have been making between your path and the supported paths you've been watching. The people moving faster than you are building on ground that has a specific structural vulnerability they cannot see because they have never had to examine it. Jung observed this directly. The people most destabilized by failure, by rejection, by the removal of institutional standing, were rarely the ones who had always struggled. They were the ones who had been well supported and then weren't. The confidence that had been externally seeded over years felt from the inside entirely self-generated. They had absorbed the voices that confirmed them so completely that the confirmation felt like an interior quality rather than an external input. When the inputs disappeared, what was revealed beneath them was often unexpectedly thin, not because the people were weak, but because the scaffolding had been doing structural work they didn't know was being done on their behalf. You have never had that vulnerability because you have never had the scaffolding. Every proof of your own capacity you possess
was generated in the absence of external confirmation. Every direction you've taken was chosen without anyone with authority pointing the way. Every period of doubt you metabolized without a net. This does not make you better than anyone. It makes you the builder of something that is structurally different from what the supported path produces. Not faster, not more visible, but fundamentally, irreversibly, yours. The dominant defense, the psychological sovereignty that makes you genuinely unshakable in environments where others are being destabilized, is not a technique. It cannot be learned as a set of behaviors, and it cannot be borrowed from someone whose approval you've absorbed as a substitute for your own judgment. It is an interior structure that forms only under the specific condition you have been living in, the condition of being required to locate your own signal without anyone amplifying it, required to maintain your own direction without anyone confirming it, required to generate your own sense of what is worth building without anyone reflecting its value back to you.
That structure, once it is built consciously rather than just endured, has a property that no amount of external support can conduce or remove. It cannot be taken from you because it was never given to you. The mentor can withdraw their endorsement. The institutional framework can collapse. The people who believed in you can change their minds or simply disappear. None of that touches the foundation of someone who built from the inside, because the foundation is not resting on any of it. Stop interpreting the silence as evidence of your inadequacy. The silence is the condition. It is not the verdict. What you do inside the silence, whether you fill it with defiance or narrow the perimeter around it, or learn to stay inside it long enough to hear what it is actually saying about who you are and what you are actually building, that is the only question that has ever been in front of you. This channel does not offer comfort as a substitute for clarity. It offers the kind of precision that comes from taking the interior life seriously as an object of analysis rather than something to manage between the more important things. The people who come here are not looking for reassurance. They are looking for the accurate diagnosis that makes the right work possible. The work you have ahead is not easier for understanding it this way, but it is clearer. And when you have been building in the dark, with no one confirming the direction and no external structure absorbing the cost of being wrong, clarity is the only resource that can never be taken from you because you built it yourself. In the only place anything that belongs entirely to you can be built, the interior of a mind that stopped waiting to be told who it was and started finding out.